Hey guys, Bittersteel here, back with another video, and today we are taking a look at the most recent developer diary, which is very interesting because there's been a lot of radio silence from Paradox lately on HoI4, but finally some tidbits of information. First of all, they're working on a fix for the multiplayer problems, so expect a 1.10.5 patch soon that might fix some of that multiplayer hacking. But that's not why we're here. We are here for the announcement that they've been spending most of their time on 1.11, the Barbarossa update, as well as the unannounced expansion that will be released together with that patch. So let's hop right in. Barbarossa and that new unnamed DLC will focus on the Eastern Front finally, as well as the core of Hearts of Iron, land warfare. So, as we all know, historically, Eastern Front is where the most fighting happened, the largest confrontation in history, and it's where the Axis expansion was actually stopped and they were ground down to nothing all the way to Berlin. So, in order to really do that front justice, they want to look at a few things, like weather. Weather doesn't feel impactful enough, they want to fix that. And the big one for this developer diary, logistics. Because the way logistics works now does not give you much player interaction. It's mostly something to deal with when problems pop up, you fix it, you move on. And then a few more cryptic mentions here of fixing combat and division meta, because it's been stable for a very long time, with an emphasis on very large divisions, and they hope to shake that up. I imagine it will be tied into the logistics systems, making large divisions difficult to maintain. On to the first picture, and that gives you all you really need, doesn't it? That is the biggest change they are teasing right now: railways. Railways will be vital to the way the supply system is going to work moving forward. Again, this is all very, very early and it can all still change, so don't take any of this as a given. But the way they want to make it work is to start off all your supply at the capital, the way it works now. But there will be a limit to how much supply you can realistically provide, and that is going to depend on your industry. So a country with virtually no civilian or military industry will have a very hard time fielding an army in the millions, which I guess makes sense. And then that supply has to reach the front lines, and the first way to do that is railway lines. Now, I don't know if they will allow you to build fresh railways. I think it's going to be something that's just there and you have to capture or protect. It's not something you'll be able to build, I think. I'm not sure. And the fact that supply revolves around these static railways is going to change the way you play the game dramatically. Let's see what else is here. Because as you can see from this picture, there are some things associated with your logistics capacity. For one, trains. You are going to need to build trains, unless they change that, which is going to put a strain on your economy, and with no trains, well, good luck getting your supply to the front line. And not only that, to then get your supply from those railways to your actual armies, you'll need trucks or motorized equipment. That makes sense because the train doesn't usually drive all the way to the front. Now, how do the railways work based on this picture here? It looks like the railway system starts at your capital, which makes sense, and then connects various hubs of supply. They can be victory points, or they can be ports, or they can be manually built supply dumps, but they haven't really elaborated on those supply dumps yet. Every one of those nodes has to be connected to the railway system. Sever the connection at one point and everything downstream will suffer. I imagine, for instance, if you cut this railway here between, is this Vichy? I don't know, between this city to the north and this city to the south, supply will have to be redirected along the other paths. And that is going to cost you probably more trains, more trucks, and create bottleneck problems. Very interesting. Another thing I see here is there's only 2 railways leading into France from Italy. Now, what does this mean for Italy? Italy is usually, in multiplayer, the controller of the Western Front. They will stack that west wall with a bunch of troops, but all those troops have to draw supply from Italy, meaning a well-placed invasion of Savoy by an allied player can completely throw the Axis defense of France into disarray, because there's only 2 railways here that you need to cut, and supply will have to flow through Germany and make a massive detour to get to where it needs to go. And I imagine the troops being cut off from supply will suffer. Now, it's probably going to work similar to how encirclements work now. They will start suffering attrition and lose organization. But I also think that these supply dumps you see all over this picture will serve as a sort of buffer. So when the line is cut, you will not immediately start suffering. You will have to use up that buffer that you have available within the part of a network that you still control. And when that's gone and cannot be replenished from the capital, that's probably when the attrition is going to set in. But not only that, this picture here of an ordinary river in Russia, but that picture means a lot. Rivers are going to work similar to how railways work, which is really, really interesting. Using convoys was already a thing when you need to transport your supply across sea tiles, so from port to port. But now convoys will also work to transport supplies along rivers, making rivers even more strategically important. Not just that, but rivers will only work as a supply railway if the player or the AI, anyone, controls both sides. So you can't just sit yourself along one bank of the river and stare at the enemy who's on the other side. Well, you could, but you will lose the supply benefit of that river. So you'll have to do a lot of thinking about where you set up your supply lines. For instance, a Russia player using the Stalin line will have to do a good deal of thinking about how his railway network is set up and if he really wants to give up the easy supply line of the river by sitting on only one river bank and letting the Germans take the other. Transportation along rivers will use convoys, so pretty much anyone with a river in their territory is going to want to build convoys now. So that is very interesting. Moving on from how supply flows, the supply has to flow from a hub to the actual units. As you can see here, Zhytomyr is the Russian supply hub in question, and the units further out from it that are not exactly on it will need to draw supply from it. That works by using trucks and motorized equipment, like I said before. How efficiently the supplies get to those units is going to depend on the amount of trucks you have available. Can you satisfy the need? And it's also going to depend on weather. If your weather's bad, you're probably going to be limited in terms of how far you can carry your supply from a supply zone. So you'll need to think about capturing territory with a supply hub or falling back closer to your supply hub in case you don't want to risk attrition. If you lose too many trucks to attrition, for instance, and you can no longer supply all those troops, you will lose range most likely and have to fall back again or fix your truck deficit. It's going to make you think about the logistics system much more than you do already. This is going to also make it a strategic choice where you fight, how you plan offensives, because it's not just going to be about pushing a line from this point. It is going to be very important to push towards supply hubs, cut off railways, and seize railways for yourself so your troops can still get resources. You'll have to push for supply hubs if you're going deep into Russia. Otherwise, your troops will just starve. And finally, damage to the railways is going to be simulated in a few different ways. For one, there will be a time limit, sort of like how you repair factories now, to convert the railways. That is to simulate repairing damage that was done and converting railway gauges, because the Russian trains and German trains did not have the same width of track, so you would need to simulate a bit of a delay before that all becomes operational, because your engineers have to make everything compatible. Now, Podcat did come out and say in the comments that he does not think strategic bombing will damage or destroy railways, but I do think that strategic bombing will work to attrition your supply of trains. They can't just make railways impregnable, they have to make strategic bombing viable in a way, and I think they'll do that by making strat bombers destroy trains. Like they did historically, they attacked railway lines to cut off supply. Now, all in all, this dev diary was a bit of a tease, but it's a very very interesting tease, and I think it's going to create a lot of interesting and very immersive fronts, especially in the massive Eastern Front. Barbarossa for a Germany player is going to be a lot more challenging and a lot more interesting than it was before. Now, I hope you've enjoyed this kind of content. It's very new to me. If you did, leave a like and hit me up in the comments. Maybe even consider subscribing and turning on that bell icon if you want to see more of my videos whenever I upload. If you didn't, that's fine. Just tell me in the comments and I won't bother with this anymore. Or maybe I will, because I really like doing this. That said, we also have a nice active Discord community. I'll leave a link to that in the description below. And if you want to read this dev diary for yourself, I'll leave a link to that in the description below as well. This has been me, Bitter Steel. Have a good one. See ya.